This videotape is of John Grinder teaching the final 4 days of a 24-day NLP Practitioner Certification Training in Boulder, Colorado, June 1985. In the previous 20 days of this training, participants have already learned all the basic practitioner-level NLP patterns and skills. John's job in this final 4 days is to help participants fully integrate these patterns and skills into their ongoing behavior. As John does this, at times he uses words and concepts which are richly meaningful to those who've been through this training, but may not be quite so meaningful to those without the background. For this reason, we're primarily recommending the videotape for those with some familiarity with NLP.
NLP is the study of human excellence. It comes out of a discrepancy in my personal experience of being taught by my mother. So if you've got any complaints, you know who to direct your complaints to. Being taught by my mother that when I went to school, what I was going to get access to by going to school, this is the only way she could get me out the front door, was people who would teach me about people of excellence who had preceded me in my culture. That is, the educational system was the institution that was to serve as the transfer agent between people of excellence, people who were doing extraordinary things or had done extraordinary things in my culture, language, and people like myself who were children growing up who wanted to have access to these the adventures of people who had gone before me, people who were extraordinary in some way. And I don't know what your experience was, but I know what mine was. So one way to think about this whole endeavor is it's my answer to that discrepancy. I was disappointed. There were some really fine exceptions to the disappointment that I experienced in the educational systems in this country, as well as some I've attended in other countries. But in general, it seemed to me that they were teaching mediocrity, and that people were using a statistical approach. So rather than take someone of excellence who was extraordinary in some way and study the patterns, the adventures of this person, they took somebody who was extraordinarily extroverted and operated in the world. They took somebody who was extraordinarily introverted, operated mentally with precision and excellence with their internal representations, and they did a statistical analysis and came up with the middle. The middle, of course, is exactly what I'm not interested in, and I hope you're not either. The whole purpose of this technology is to arm you, not to make you better therapists, not to make you better business people, not to make you better human beings in any sense. That's not my goal. That's never been my goal. I don't really care much about that. What I am interested in is promoting human excellence. And the purpose of technology is to prepare you to go out and create your own models of excellence. If that doesn't happen, the program has failed, as far as I'm concerned. You may be happy. You may find yourself with better bottom lines in terms of your business. You may find yourself a lot more creative, a lot more powerful, able to do things with a single bound in your professional life, improve your relationships in your family, etc. That's all lovely, and I compliment you. I applaud. That's important. That's the fabric of your life. But that's your life. I have a different mission. As far as I'm concerned, my mission is to prepare you as best I can to take the technology, especially after you've had some months of integration where you're running these patterns and noticing responses and making adjustments and doing things backwards and inside out to find out what the limits of what you've been taught are. At some point you'll go, I've done this before. I don't want to do it again. I want to do something else. And as you begin to look around the world to figure out what else that might be, it would be an interesting challenge to you, that you might consider what I'm offering here as a way of guidance this morning. I hope you are seized and obsessed at some point in your future with human excellence. It comes in lots of forms. It has different colors and shapes and sounds attached to it. Even smells different. But there is no scarcity of the issue of human excellence. In your daily lives, you have contact with people who may not be the well-rounded, lovely person you would like them to be, but there are parts of them that are absolutely superb. The way they handle this situation, the way they deal with that one, how they think up a response here, how they execute it. Lots of possibilities in your everyday life if you sensitize yourself to it. The real disaster as far as the educational systems in our country go, and again, there are lovely exceptions, you should be so lucky, is the idea that they set up self-fulfilling prophecies, set up perceptual biases to teach you to scan for the mid-range in any human activity. And I'd like you to drop that. That's nonsense. It's certainly not going to be, my particular objectives are not going to be met. And I'm going to make you partially responsible for meeting my objectives here. You can accept that challenge or not, obviously. So my proposal is that whatever you do with this material over the next few months, there's going to come a point down the line where you've demonstrated to your own satisfaction that you've been successful in applying this material to yourself as well as other people. I should comment on that. If you can't access, anchor, and maintain your own state when operating in a personal or professional context, you have absolutely no right to be messing with anybody else's states. In its applied form, NLP is, in a sense, the syntax of states. That is to say, what state will you decide to occupy in this relationship? What set of states? How are you going to shift state? What cue are you going to use to shift state? What class of states will the states that you're occupying and presenting to the world do in terms of accessing and maintaining states in other people? It's all relational. There is no single resource state that will serve you well in the class of context you have to occupy in a daily run through your life. If you don't know that you're multiple personality, figure that out real quick. And the only difference between you as multiple personality people who are locked up is that you have metasystems or are developing them. And by metasystem, all I'm referring to is the fact that a multiple personality in a pathological sense, I think it's an evolutionary stage, by the way. I think the species is going through some remarkable changes. It has been for centuries, but it's really crystallizing in the century we happen to be in. R.D. Laing's famous for claiming schizophrenia is a natural response to a fragmented technological society. And if you've had any good fortune to be able to live with a tribal society, as I've had the good fortune several times, you'll know what R.D. Laing's talking about. There are mechanisms, there are relationships, extended family groups, hunting groups, tribal groups, where everything that you need in your development as a human being within the metaphor of that culture is available to you. So when Bill was a little kid, it was not his father or mother that disciplined him in the tribe. It was his uncle, maternal uncle. And that's a function that's been in that tribe for centuries and centuries. Who were his teachers? Well, they were not consolidated in an institution somewhere where they taught mediocrity. They were the people in the tribe who were available at that moment in his development who could offer him the skills and behaviors that he needed as a model. In a coherent culture, such as the ones you can find still in certain parts of the world, tribal in nature, fourth world, so-called fourth world countries, you're going to find all of those needs are available. There are functions available within the extended group, but not here. And so what happens here, we have to be a lot of the functions that are usually distributed in an extended network. So we become schizophrenic. But schizophrenia is not an adequate response. It's only two models. We need a lot more than just two models to operate. So we become multiple personalities. And as I started to say, there's only a couple of differences between me as a multiple personality and someone who's locked up for the pathology called multiple personality. And that is, a multiple personality in a pathological sense is someone who's under external stimulus control. An odor comes up, a voice quality occurs, a certain pattern of behavior operates in the environment. And suddenly that person, without any voluntary choice being involved, shifts to a different persona. And they're amnesic for what they were doing a moment ago, typically. And those are the only two differences. The locus of control, as far as which persona I offer to the world, is under my control. I have the choices. I can choose whichever one I believe to be appropriate for the context I'm operating in. So I maintain the choice within myself of which of those faces I will offer to the world. And the second thing is, while I'm known altogether too widely for being amnesic for lots of parts of my life. It's not a requirement. I can, if I choose, remember my experiences, whether I'm talking about travel experiences I had in East Africa, or what I ate for breakfast, the river rafting trip I went on the Arkansas River yesterday. The guy I was yesterday in the front of the boat and the guy I am today are really different. But I do have the ability to recall that experience and pull parts of it into this persona and use it. But those are the only two differences. Claiming multiple personality is simply an evolutionary stage. Some people get caught, because of cultural values, in the necessity of being consistent. What are you if you're consistent? Well, boring. Unless we play semantic games and go consistently flexible or consistently creative or something. But in general, consistency does imply that kind of experience. You also lose your status as a hunter if you become consistent. What's the difference between someone who's hunted and someone who's a hunter? Direction? Perhaps. Outcome? Perhaps. I think those are both legitimate responses. I'm searching for some other characteristic that distinguishes a hunter from a hunted one. Predictability. To be an effective hunter, you have to be able at any moment in time to tell me, if I'm your teacher, what part of the feeding, mating, seasonal cycle, the prey, that is your object, is in at that moment in time. So if we transfer the metaphor literally to the issues of hunting, as has been traditional in the culture, then if you're a good hunter, I can send you after any animal at any time of day or night, and you will know where they are and what they're doing and how to make the approach. And what enticements, stalking, what tracking is required to succeed as a hunter. If the way you approach your prey becomes predictable, you've just lost your status. Not only as a hunter, because you'll fail, but number two, you yourself become vulnerable to be hunted. And it doesn't matter how good you are at what you do if you're predictable. These are themes I wish to develop over the run we have together here. But the biggest challenge is the one I started with. I want you to take this material at some point in your future and go, enough of that, I know how to do this, I do it elegantly, I do it effectiveness, and I'm even efficient at it. I can get it done pretty quick. And you've savored it, and you've enjoyed your triumphs, and you recognize you're starting to repeat yourself. And at that point, then remember the invitation. And remember the technology that you've been armed with, prepared with, so that you can make your prey even excellent. And it's a hunt that enhances both the hunter and the huntee, and one which meets my objectives, which is why I'm talking to you this morning. Not for your objectives, but for mine. We'll get to your objectives in a moment. I want you to understand mine. There's a dovetailing of our objectives in the sense that that's what I want, and the easiest way that I know of for us to get to the point where you'll meet my objectives is for me to serve yours for a few days. There are holes in your education and your background as far as what's happened here. Of necessity, there's a limited amount of time, energy, resources. I need to know about those. That's your part of the contract. My part of the contract is to deliver both what you want and, even more importantly, what I perceive you to need in terms of rounding out your education. A great deal of what we'll be doing here involves integration of skills that you've already been presented with, but maybe have not attached in some core way to your own behaviors. It may involve finding, for some of you, that you've already mastered it and integrated this class of skills, let's say anchoring skills, to the point where I have to take those choices away from you. It's a principle called stretch. And we've talked about this principle here, so you understand what I'm referring to. If you can, you may not. If you can't, you have to. And It goes a long way to keeping yourself alive as you go through life. Let's take language learning. There's a man who lives in Vancouver, British Columbia, who Guinness Book of Records has just verified is the world's most advanced polyglot that they've been able to find so far. He speaks 42 languages fluently. Exactly. Oh, God. 42 languages. More remarkable than that is the fact that he can go, let me give you an operational definition. Let's call first fluency a behaviorally defined competency whereby someone can speak with enough fluency in language X, not their native language, that native speakers of language X, in the contextual context of the culture, are comfortable talking with them. Let's call that first fluency. Roughly, you understand. Some of you have achieved it, some of you have dreamed about it. Some of you have done both. And this man can go from having no contact, written or auditory, with a language to first fluency in 7 hours. Notice that you can't go back and listen.
Of the negative, say, aspect of it, of maybe telling you.
You don't know what she wants yet. Answer your question. Do you understand how to proceed? Okay. So, I want somebody to hear tonal distinctions as the markings.